There is a photograph from 1967 that most people have never really looked at. A woman sits alone in a London apartment. She is 53 years old. Her face, still beautiful, but tired now. The eyes that once made the world stop and stare look somewhere far away, somewhere nobody else can follow. She is wearing simple clothes, no cameras around, no red carpet, no applause, just silence and the weight of everything she has lost. This woman won 2 Academy Awards. She played Scarlett O'Hara when the whole world wanted that role. She married the greatest actor of his generation. She was called the most beautiful woman alive. But in this photograph, she looks like someone waiting for something that will never come. 6 months later, she would be found dead on her bedroom floor, alone, while the man who loved her was somewhere else, while the man she loved was married to someone else, while the daughter she left behind was living a life without her. And most people know Vivien Leigh as a movie star. What they don't know is what happened behind the beauty, the illness that stole her mind, the love that destroyed her, the loneliness that followed her to the end. This is that story. Vivien Mary Hartley was born on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, India. Not Hollywood, not London, but a small hill town in the mountains where British colonial families lived far from home. Her father, Ernest, was a British officer, gentle and quiet, the kind of man who didn't demand attention. Her mother, Gertrude, was different, Irish Catholic, beautiful in a sharp way, and emotionally distant. She believed love was shown through discipline, not warmth. Vivien was their only child, and from the beginning people noticed her, not because of anything she did, but because of how she looked. Even as a toddler, strangers stopped to stare. Large blue-green eyes, dark hair, features too perfect for a child. You don't quite know how. When Vivien was around 6 years old, her parents made a decision that would shape everything. They sent her to England, to a Catholic boarding school. It was common for British families in India, proper, necessary. The education was better there. But reasons don't matter to a 6-year-old watching her parents disappear as the ship pulls away. She lived with strangers, slept in dormitories, followed rules set by nuns. She saw her mother and father only during holidays. Letters arrived, sometimes gifts. But the arms that should have held her were thousands of miles away. She never talked much about this later, but the mark was deep. She learned that people who love you can also send you away, that love and distance can exist together, that you can be wanted and abandoned at the same time. If that was true, then the only way to keep people close was to become impossible to leave. Too bright, too brilliant, too captivating to look away from. At school, she found the thing that made loneliness bearable: acting. The moment she stepped on stage, something clicked. She wasn't the lonely girl from Darjeeling anymore. She was whoever the script said. She could make a room full of people laugh or cry. And when she performed, nobody looked away. Nobody left. Teachers noticed her talent. Other students noticed. She had something magnetic. When Vivien performed, you watched. You couldn't help it. She threw herself into drama completely. Classes, school plays, reading scripts. She was smart and driven in a quiet, fierce way. Then one day, still a teenager, she went to see a play in London. The lead actor was a young man named Laurence Olivier, tall, handsome, electric on stage. Everything she wanted to be and everything she wanted to have. After the performance, she turned to her friend and said something that sounded crazy. She said she would become a great actress, and she would marry that man. She had seen him once, from the audience. She got both wishes, and both of them would nearly destroy her. Vivien left school wanting 2 things: to act, and to live a life bigger than the one she was given. But in 1930s England, so young women from good families didn't run off to become actresses. They married well, had children, kept their ambitions small enough to fit inside a house. So Vivien did what was expected, at least at first. In 1932, at 19 years old, She married Herbert Lee Holman. He was a lawyer, respectable, 13 years older, the kind of man mothers approved of, stable income, good reputation. Herbert adored Vivien. He wanted a traditional life, a wife waiting when he came home, children in the garden, quiet evenings by the fire. Vivien wanted something else. She didn't know exactly what, but the life Herbert offered felt like a cage with soft walls. She smiled at dinner parties. She played the young wife. But inside, something was pulling at her, something restless and impossible to name. On October 12, 1933, their daughter Suzanne was born. Vivien was 19, a mother now. She held her baby and felt what every new mother feels: love, responsibility, the weight of another life depending on you. But motherhood didn't quiet the restlessness. If anything, it made it louder. The walls felt closer. The routine felt heavier. The days blurred together. She loved Suzanne. That was never the question. But loving someone and being fulfilled by them are not the same thing. So she did the thing that would define her and haunt her equally. She went back to acting. She started small, drama classes, small theatre parts, tiny film roles, nothing major, but enough to remind her what it felt like to be alive, to be seen, to step into a spotlight and feel every eye turn toward her. Herbert didn't understand. Married women with children didn't chase stage careers. It wasn't proper. He earned enough money. She had a beautiful home. What more could she want? He asked that question more than once. She could never answer it properly. The roles got bigger. Her name appeared in reviews. Directors noticed her and kept her out at night. Herbert's world was shattered. Vivien spent more time away. Rehearsals ran late. Performances kept her out at night. Herbert's world was quiet and predictable. The theatre world was exciting and alive. Suzanne was left more and more with others. Herbert took on more responsibility. And Gertrude, Vivien's own cold mother, stepped in to help raise the baby. The irony was painful. Gertrude, who had sent Vivien away at 6, was now raising Vivien's daughter. The cycle was repeating, a mother choosing something other than her child. Whether Vivien saw the pattern or not, she kept going. The pull of the stage was stronger than the pull of home. She wasn't a villain for leaving, but she wasn't blameless either. Suzanne was real. Suzanne was small. Suzanne needed a mother who stayed. Vivien didn't stay. During this time, she made one more decision. She chose a new name, changed Vivien to Vivien. Took part of her husband's surname, Vivien Leigh, someone new, someone who hadn't been sent away as a child, someone who hadn't left a baby behind. Vivien Leigh was a creation, a performance, the first and most important role she ever played. And the man she had dreamed about since she was a teenager was about to walk into her life. In 1935, Vivien Leigh met Laurence Olivier, and everything she had built began to burn. They were both married. Both had young children. Both were building careers in London theatre. None of that mattered. From the moment they met, something electric passed between them. The kind of connection that makes you forget your responsibilities. The kind that makes promises to other people feel like they belong to a different life. Olivier was everything Vivien had dreamed about since she was a teenager. Tall, handsome, wildly talented. He commanded every room. When he performed, people stopped breathing. And he was already being called the greatest actor of his generation. Vivien matched him, just as ambitious, just as hungry for greatness. When they were together, they weren't just two people falling in love. They were two flames feeding each other, growing brighter, growing more dangerous. They began an affair. In 1930s England, this was deeply scandalous. Divorce was shameful. Adultery was worse. They did it anyway, openly, recklessly, as if rules didn't apply to them. The cost was paid by the people they left behind. Vivien left Herbert. She left Suzanne. The little girl was barely 2 when her mother walked out for another man. Herbert was devastated. He had built his life around their family. Now it was gone. Olivier left his wife, Jill Esmond. He left their young son, Tarquin. Jill had supported his career from the beginning. Now she was being discarded for a younger woman with a more famous face. Tarquin grew up without his father. Years later, all he wrote about it, the confusion, the loneliness, the quiet understanding that your father chose someone else over you. Suzanne carried similar wounds. She watched her mother from a distance, saw her face in magazines, knew her mother was famous and beautiful, but never understood why she had left. 2 families destroyed, 2 children wondering what they did wrong. All for love. Vivien and Olivier didn't look back. They looked forward, together. In 1939, as the biggest casting search in Hollywood history was happening, producer David O. Selznick was making Gone with the Wind. Everyone wanted to know one thing: who would play Scarlett O'Hara? Every famous actress in America auditioned. The search went on for years. Scarlett was the role of a lifetime. Vivien wanted it. The problem was, she was British, unknown in America. A long shot. But Vivien Leigh had never let long odds stop her. She travelled to Hollywood, got herself in front of Selznick, auditioned with fire and ferocity that stunned everyone. She was Scarlett, not playing her. She was her. The willfulness, the charm, the survivor's instinct. Selznick gave her the role. A virtually unknown British actress had beaten every star in America. It seemed impossible, but Vivien had willed it into existence. Gone with the Wind premiered in December 1939. Vivien became the most famous actress in the world overnight. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress at 26 years old. And then she got the other thing she wanted. On August 31st, 1940, Vivien and Olivier married. They were called the Golden Couple, the king and queen of theatre and film, the most beautiful pair in the world. For a brief moment, Vivien had everything: the career, the man, the fame, the beauty, the love that felt like it could survive anything. But even during those golden years, something was wrong. Mood swings came from nowhere. Vivien would be charming one day, cold and cruel the next. Bursts of rage followed by days of darkness. She would say cutting things to Olivier and not remember afterward. Some nights she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced in circles. She talked for hours without stopping. Then she would crash, days in bed, unable to move, crying for reasons she couldn't explain. Olivier didn't understand. Nobody did. There was no name for it yet. He told himself it was stress, the pressure of fame, exhaustion from working too hard. It wasn't any of those things. The thing that would destroy them was already inside her, growing quietly, waiting. The 1940s should have been the best years of Vivien Leigh's life. She had everything: the career, the man, the fame, the beauty. But something was wrong, and it was getting worse. The mood swings grew more frequent, more intense, more frightening. What once seemed like artistic temperament began to look like something darker, something that couldn't be explained away. Vivien would have periods of extraordinary energy. She would stay awake for 2 or 3 days straight, talk rapidly, jump from subject to subject, spend money wildly. Her eyes would have a brightness that seemed almost feverish. During these times, she became someone Olivier didn't recognize. She would flirt aggressively with other men, sometimes more than flirt. She would say cruel things to people closest to her, pick fights over nothing, become convinced everyone was against her, and then she would crash. The energy would drain out of her completely. She would retreat to bed for days, unable to eat, unable to speak. She would tell Olivier she was worthless, that everyone would be better off without her. The woman who had won Academy Awards would curl up like a child and weep until nothing was left. Olivier tried to help, but there was no understanding this. In the 1940s, doctors used words like nervous exhaustion and hysteria. They recommended rest. They had no idea what they were dealing with. What Vivien had was bipolar disorder. They called it manic depressive illness back then. The cycles of mania and depression were not character flaws. They were not choices. Something was broken in her brain chemistry, something she didn't ask for and couldn't control. But she paid the price anyway. Then came the miscarriages. Vivien and Olivier desperately wanted children together. They talked about it constantly, imagined what their child would look like, picked out names. Vivien got pregnant and lost the baby. The grief was enormous. She blamed herself even though there was nothing she could have done. She wondered if God was punishing her for leaving Herbert, for leaving Suzanne. She got pregnant again, lost that baby too. Each miscarriage triggered something in her. The depressions afterward were deeper than before. The manic episodes more extreme. Says it was as if grief unlocked doors inside her mind that should have stayed closed. The guilt made everything worse. She had left Suzanne to be with Olivier. Now she couldn't give him a child. The universe seemed to be sending a message. Doctors tried different treatments, sedatives during manic episodes, various medications that mostly didn't work. Eventually, they recommended electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, electric shocks to the brain. The treatment involved triggering controlled seizures. And doctors believed it could reset the brain somehow. Vivien underwent ECT multiple times over the years. The treatments were brutal. When she woke up, she was confused, frightened. She had gaps in her memory. Sometimes she forgot things that mattered. Pieces of her life simply disappeared. Sometimes ECT helped temporarily. The episodes would calm. She would seem like herself. Olivier would see glimpses of the woman he had fallen in love with. But the relief never lasted. And the cycles always returned. And each round of ECT took something from her. Imagine knowing your own brain is your enemy. That at any moment you might become someone else. Someone who hurts the people you love. And then waking up afterward with holes in your memory. That was Vivien's life. And her body was failing too. In the late 1940s, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis, a serious lung infection that was still dangerous then. Her lungs were permanently damaged. Doctors told her to rest. Stop working, take care of her health. She refused. Work was the only thing besides Olivier that made her feel alive. On stage, she could be someone else, someone whose mind didn't betray her. Giving up acting meant giving up the only identity she had left. So she kept working, through the illness, through the coughing, through the exhaustion. Her mind attacked her from the inside. Her lungs attacked her from the inside. And slowly, the man she loved began pulling away. Olivier was exhausted. Years of managing her episodes, covering for her publicly, holding her through depressions, calming her during manias, dealing with affairs that happened when she wasn't herself. He loved her, but love doesn't make you fireproof, and Olivier was burning out. He didn't leave yet, but the distance between them was growing. The silences getting longer, the arguments getting worse. The thing inside Vivien was destroying her slowly, but it was also destroying them. In 1951, and Vivien Leigh took on a role that would become the performance of her lifetime. A role so close to her own experience that the line between acting and living almost disappeared. Blanche DuBois in A Streetcar Named Desire. Tennessee Williams had written the play a few years earlier. It told the story of a fragile Southern woman whose mind is slipping. Blanche is elegant and charming. She speaks of old money and fine things, but underneath, she is falling apart. Her grip on reality is loosening, and she depends on the kindness of strangers because she has nothing else left. By the end, Blanche is taken to a mental institution. The beautiful mask has cracked. The fragile woman has shattered. Vivien understood this character in a way that went beyond technique. She didn't have to imagine what it felt like to lose your mind. She didn't have to pretend. She lived it every day. Director Elia Kazan chose her for the film. Marlon Brando would play opposite her. The production was intense. Us vibrates with something real. When Blanche vibrates with something real. When Blanche talks about her fears, you believe her. When she tries to hold herself together, you feel the effort. When she breaks, you break with her. She wasn't entirely acting fragility, she was living it. Marlon Brando reportedly found the experience unsettling, and he saw how close Vivien was to the edge. The breakdowns on screen felt too real. The film was released in 1951. Vivien won her second Academy Award. 12 years after Gone with the Wind, she had done it again. A two-time Oscar winner, one of the most acclaimed actresses in history. But the triumph was wrapped in something bitter. Her greatest performance came from her greatest pain. The illness destroying her life was also fueling her most brilliant work. Was the beauty and the destruction were feeding each other. She stood on stage holding her second Oscar, smiled for cameras, thanked the Academy. Inside, she was falling apart. Filming Streetcar had pushed her closer to her own edge. The manic episodes continued. The depressions continued. Nothing was getting better. And during this period, something else happened. She had an affair with Peter Finch, an Australian actor, handsome, charming. It happened during a manic episode, or was intensified by one. During her highs, boundaries disappeared. She became reckless, impulsive, someone else entirely. Olivier knew about the affair. The betrayal wounded him deeply, not just because his wife slept with another man, but because the woman who did it didn't feel like his wife. She felt like a stranger wearing Vivien's face. He described the manic Vivien as someone he didn't recognize, someone who looked like the woman he loved, but acted like a different person. This raised a question nobody could answer. If someone you love becomes a different person because of illness, who do you blame? The person? The illness? Do you stay because you remember who they were? Or do you leave because you cannot survive who they become? Olivier was asking himself that question more often now. Vivien sensed him pulling away. She tried harder, had good days, good weeks sometimes, reminded him of the woman he fell in love with. But the bad times always came back. And each time, she saw more distance in his eyes. She had won 2 Oscars, given performances that would be remembered forever. None of it could save her. The illness didn't care about awards. It just kept coming, wave after wave, taking pieces of her each time. And slowly, it was taking Olivier too. By the mid-1950s, the marriage that once seemed like destiny was dying. Not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly, painfully. At the way things die when both people keep trying to save them, even though neither knows how. Olivier was exhausted in ways words couldn't capture. Nearly 2 decades of managing Vivien's illness, covering for her on film sets, lying to directors, holding her through depressions that lasted weeks, containing the damage during manic episodes. He had watched the woman he loved become a stranger over and over, forgiven affairs that happened when she wasn't herself. He cleaned up messes that weren't his fault, put his own career second because she needed him more. He was tired, not just physically, soul tired. The kind that doesn't go away with rest. The kind that makes you wonder if you have anything left to give. He still loved her. That was the tragedy. He never stopped. But love wasn't enough. Love couldn't fix her brain chemistry. Love couldn't stop the cycles. Love couldn't bring back the woman he married and make her stay. Then he met someone else. A Joan Plowright, an actress, younger than Vivien by more than a decade. Talented, intelligent, and stable in a way Vivien had never been. Joan didn't have episodes. She didn't disappear into darkness. She didn't become a stranger without warning. Being with her felt like stepping out of a storm into a quiet room. Olivier fell in love with her. Or maybe he fell in love with the peace she represented. After years of chaos, he needed someone who wouldn't break, someone he didn't have to save. He began pulling away from Vivien. The distance that had been growing became a gulf. They were still married, still lived together sometimes, but the connection was fraying thread by thread. Vivien felt it happening. Even through her illness, she knew. She tried harder, had stretches where she seemed like herself, brilliant, charming. She would remind him of the woman he fell in love with. But the episodes always came back, and each time he retreated further. In 1960, they divorced. The news shocked the world, the golden couple, the king and queen of theatre, the love story that seemed eternal, over. Olivier married Joan Plowright almost immediately. Within months, he had a new wife, soon new children, a new family, a new life, as if the previous chapter was closed. For Vivien, the divorce was not a closed chapter. It was an amputation. She had given up everything for Olivier, her first husband, her daughter, her reputation. She had chosen him over everyone. And now he was gone, married to someone else, building a future without her. Every sacrifice she made was for nothing. Friends described her as hollowed out. The spark in her eyes seemed dimmer. She smiled for cameras, gave interviews, pretended to be fine. Underneath, she was devastated beyond words. She kept working. Theatre, mostly. Still brilliant on stage. Audiences still loved her. But the roles were smaller now. Hollywood had moved on. Leading parts went to younger actresses. Vivien was in her late 40s. In film's cruel mathematics, that meant something. After Olivier, she found Jack Merivale. Jack was an actor, kind, patient, devoted. He understood her illness, and he loved her anyway. He didn't run when episodes came. He stayed, held her through depressions, managed manias as best he could, gave her stability and companionship. Vivien cared for Jack deeply. She was grateful. She leaned on him completely. But he wasn't Olivier. He was never going to be Olivier. Everyone knew it. Jack probably knew it best. He loved a woman whose heart belonged to someone else. He lived in the shadow of a love that had consumed her and walked away. He stayed anyway. Meanwhile, Suzanne was now an adult. The little girl left behind 3 decades earlier had her own life, her own family. The relationship between mother and daughter was complicated. They saw each other sometimes, but the bond carried weight of all those years, all those missed moments. And the choice Vivien made when Suzanne was barely 2. Trying to reconnect is not the same as being there. Some wounds don't heal with apologies. So this was Vivien's life in the early 1960s. No Olivier, no children with the man she loved, a daughter she could never fully recover, a career winding down, an illness that still ruled her, a body weakened by tuberculosis, and a kind man who stayed even though he was second choice. She was 48 years old, 2 Academy Awards, or called the most beautiful actress in the world, and never more alone. The final years of Vivien Leigh's life were a slow fade, not a dramatic collapse, just a gradual dimming of a light that once burned so bright. The tuberculosis was getting worse. Her lungs were badly damaged. She coughed constantly, tired easily. Simple things left her exhausted. Climbing stairs, walking across a room, getting through a performance without losing breath. Doctors told her again and again to rest, stop working. So she kept going. The bipolar episodes continued too. The illness showed no signs of letting go. She still cycled between mania and depression, still underwent ECT treatments that helped temporarily then stopped helping. Jack Merivale stayed through all of it, managed her medications. It was her anchor, the one constant in a life that was full of ups and downs. He was the one thing that she could always count on. He was the one thing that she could always rely on. He was the one thing that she could always trust. He was the one thing that she could always depend on. He was the one thing that was her anchor. The one constant in a life that had become very small. She still worked when she could. Her last film was Ship of Fools in 1965. She played a middle-aged woman in a loveless marriage. Critics noted she still had the talent, the presence. But anyone watching closely could see the toll. She was 52 but looked older. The famous beauty was fading. Her face showed years of illness and treatment and grief. After that film, she focused on theatre, toured, performed, gave audiences everything even when she had little left. In summer 1967, Vivien was in London, preparing for another production. She had been feeling unwell for weeks, the tuberculosis acting up, tired all the time, but she pushed through. That was what she always did. July 7th, 1967, a Friday night. Jack had plans to go out that evening. Vivien told him to go. She wasn't feeling well enough to join. She would stay home, rest, maybe read. Jack left their apartment at 54 Eaton Square in Belgravia, a beautiful building in a wealthy neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Vivien was alone. What happened next? No one knows exactly. No witnesses, no cameras, just Vivien in that apartment by herself. At some point, she got out of bed, maybe needed water, maybe wanted to move to another room, maybe couldn't sleep. Her lungs couldn't handle the effort. Fluid filled them. She couldn't breathe. She collapsed on the bedroom floor. She tried to reach somewhere, the bathroom, the phone. She didn't make it. When Jack returned around 10:30 that night, he found her, lying on the floor, still, silent, eyes open. She had been dead perhaps 30 minutes. The woman loved by millions. 2 Academy Awards. Called the most beautiful actress in the world. Married to the greatest actor of his generation. Dead alone, on a bedroom floor, while the man who stayed was somewhere else. Jack called for help. An ambulance came. Nothing could be done. Vivien Leigh was gone. She was 53 years old. News spread quickly. By morning, the whole world knew. Newspapers ran headlines. Tributes poured in from actors, directors, ordinary people who loved her from a distance. Laurence Olivier was informed. By all accounts, he went very quiet. Just whatever feelings he still carried, he kept them to himself. He and Joan went to the apartment to help with arrangements. He was there for her in death in a way he hadn't been in her final years. Whether that was love or guilt or duty, no one can say. London's West End theatres dimmed their lights. 1 hour of darkness in her honour, a tradition reserved for the greatest, the performers who gave everything to the stage. Vivien had certainly done that, given everything. And everything had been taken in return. Her funeral was private, small, the kind she might have wanted after a lifetime of being watched. Suzanne was there. The daughter left behind more than 30 years earlier. The woman who watched from a distance as her mother lived her glamorous, tragic life. She stood at the funeral, carrying all the complicated feelings, love and resentment, grief and distance, the pain of being the child who wasn't chosen. Whatever passed through her mind, as she kept it private, some wounds are too deep to share. Vivien was cremated, ashes scattered privately, and just like that, she was gone. After Vivien Leigh died, the world moved on. That is what the world does. But the people she left behind carried her with them, each in their own way. Suzanne lived a quiet life, far from Hollywood, far from the spotlight that consumed her mother. She married, had children, built the kind of ordinary, stable life Vivien never had, and perhaps never wanted. Out of distance, the wounds that never fully of distance, the wounds that never fully healed. But she also spoke of love, the kind that exists even when it comes with pain. Suzanne died in 2023 at 89. A long life, a quiet life, the opposite of her mother's. When she died, the last person who knew Vivien simply as a mother was gone. Oh, the last one who remembered her not as a movie star, but as the woman who was supposed to be there and wasn't. Laurence Olivier lived more than 2 decades after Vivien's death, stayed married to Joan Plowright, had 3 children, continued acting and directing, became Lord Olivier in 1970. He rarely spoke publicly about Vivien. When asked, he was polite but guarded, acknowledged her talent, acknowledged their history, kept deeper feelings locked away. in private. Those who knew him said he was haunted, not every day. But there were moments when her name came up, and something shifted behind his eyes. Something painful, something unresolved. He once admitted she was probably the love of his life. The words came out reluctantly, as if he hadn't meant to say them. The admission meant something. It also meant nothing. Because he had left her, chosen someone else, built a new life while she struggled alone. Olivier died in 1989 at 82. Vivien had been gone 22 years, but when people talked about his life, they still talked about her. They were bound together in history, whether he liked it or not. Jack Merivale never fully recovered from finding Vivien on that floor. How could he? That image must have stayed behind his eyes forever. He lived until 1990, never married after Vivien, continued acting, continued living, but part of him stayed in that apartment. Part of him never left that July night. I'm unbearably sad about that. Something unbearably sad about that. Something heroic, too. He stayed when others left. The world remembers Vivien Leigh differently than those who knew her. The world remembers Scarlett O'Hara, the willful Southern belle who survived through determination. Tomorrow is another day. That line belongs to Vivien now, always will. The world remembers Blanche DuBois, the fragile woman who depended on the kindness of strangers. That performance is studied in acting schools, considered one of the greatest ever filmed. The world remembers the beauty, those eyes, that face. Something not quite human, too perfect, too luminous. But the world doesn't remember the rest. Not the little girl sent away at 6. Not the mother who left her daughter behind. Not the illness that stole her mind over and over. Not the miscarriages. Or not the ECT treatments. Not the tuberculosis slowly suffocating her. Not how alone she was at the end. That is the gap between legend and truth. Legends are simple. Truth is complicated. Vivien wanted 2 things more than anything: to be a great actress, to be loved by Laurence Olivier. She achieved both, completely, and both were taken from her. The illness took her mind, the tuberculosis took her body, Olivier took her heart. She died with none of the 3 things that defined her: her sanity, her health, her love. But she left something that will outlive everyone who knew her. Scarlett O'Hara will exist as long as film exists. Blanche DuBois will exist as long as people tell stories about beautiful broken women. Maybe that is the only immortality that matters, the work you leave behind. Or maybe it is cold comfort. Vivien didn't want immortality. She wanted to be loved. She wanted to stay. And she wanted her mind to stop betraying her, and her body to stop failing, and the man she gave up everything for to hold her hand forever. She got none of that. She got 2 Oscars, her name in history books, remembered as one of the greatest actresses who ever lived, and she died alone on a bedroom floor at 53. There is no neat lesson here, no moral that makes the tragedy easier. Some lives are just hard. Some people are just unlucky. As some combinations of talent and beauty and illness add up to something unbearable. Vivien Leigh was all of those things. Brilliant and broken, loved and abandoned, famous and forgotten in ways that mattered most to her. She was born in Darjeeling, died in London. In between, she burned brighter than almost anyone, and the burning consumed her completely.